Hello, hello, everyone. Good morning and happy, glorious Wednesday over here. We are going to give it a couple of seconds so folks can log in while we're doing that. Hello, one more time. My name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC. If this is your first time joining us, the SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LASBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicating to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Lori, I'm excited for today. I'm not going to lie because we have great guests all the times, but I feel that today we are going to learn lots.
We are, and we do have great guests all the time. And always a shout out if you want to be a guest or you know somebody that wants to be a guest. I'm currently booking. Do let us know. Well, with no further ado, let's get started with today because I got a couple things to go over today. So, the first thing I want to talk about is the upcoming webinars. I've got August booked. I think I gave it to Sadie. She may have it already to put in the chat. If not, I'll be announcing it next week. We have the special webinar that I'm doing, cash flow model instruction and template provided. That's going to be tomorrow. This is my first time doing this webinar. I always have taught people how to use a CFO style cash flow model on one-on-ones. This is my first time doing it in kind of a webinar type situation. In addition to getting the template, you can then set up a one-on-one to go over it because this is a pretty intense CFO tool that's going to help you monitor both where you are in cash flow today and into the future. So it's got a lot of nuts and bolts and things that you really have to understand how to use it properly. Sole Prop LLC S Corp, that's already happened. So I actually got to take that off. The last one for this month is should you be charging your customer sales tax? But guys, I do repeat these key ones, especially the Sole Prop LLC and S Corp one. So I talked about the cash flow model. I know I talked about the company audit from a CFO perspective. I'm going to be launching that as a special webinar, and we got the Ask an Expert series coming up in the fall as well. Upcoming shows. Next week, we got Ramin coming on to talk about the digital marketplace. He's a digital marketplace expert. Real excited to have him on the show. I think we're going to learn a ton from him. August, I got my August lineup. August 6th, Ashley Arnold is coming on from Lady Cakes. And I had to almost beg her to come on. She's very shy to come on the show, but you're going to be so impressed with her. She creates all of these wonderful sweets, sells them out the different markets. But what's interesting with Ashley, she's been at this for a few years and she has learned so much in understanding pricing and how that impacts the bottom line that she just amazes me because she's taken my courses, done the models, and she has come away with such a great learning. I wanted her to come on the show and talk about what she's learned as being an entrepreneur so far. Mike Wax is coming on the following week. This is going to be a fascinating story, and I'll let him tell you it. I'm not going to get into the details, but he has this company that sells these very cool model trains, and he's also got an interesting background and what caused him to get into it. So I will let that story unfold as well. Okay, lots on this slide. I want to go over some things pretty quickly. This is based on last week's conversation. We had Samara on the show and we were talking about sole props and HR things. And I had a whole lot of questions that were coming up in the Q&A and in the chat of what these terms mean. So this is things I talk about every day on my different webinars, but I just felt like because of the number of questions, I wanted to run all this information in one setting. So we talked about a sole prop last week. Keep in mind, a sole prop is not registered with the Secretary of State. That's the unique difference. Now, it is said and told too much to this degree that you got to be registered with the Secretary estate, at least as an LLC, to protect your assets or you'll lose your home, that is not necessarily a true statement. Sole props are great functions to work under, great legal structures to function under, and often not talked about enough. But that's what we were talking about as a sole prop last week. LLC and S corps are registered with the Secretary of State. An LLC can be taxed as an S corp. That's what we were also chatting about as far as employee payment, the W-2, only if the S election form is filled out. We talked about a DBA. A DBA is not a sole prop. These are legal structure, guys. This is what I wanted to get to. Sole prop, LLC, S corp, C corps, all of these are legal structures, whether or not you are registered with the Secretary of State. A DBA is simply a name that allows you to do financial transactions in a name other than your surname, if you're a sole prop, or your legally registered corporation name. So just because you're DBA doesn't mean you have or sole prop doesn't mean you have a DBA. I could be a consultant, call myself Lori Williams, get checks written out at Lori Williams, and have them put in the bank account. I could even be a consultant, have a website that says greatest consultant, business cards that say greatest consultant. But when it comes to getting a financial transaction, if I don't have greatest consultant on my bank account, the bank will not put it in my bank account. So DBAs are all about allowing you to do financial transactions in a name other than your surname or your registered corp name. People talk about 1099. They say I'm a 1099. And I said last week, well, that's calling yourself a form. That really doesn't make sense. And got a lot of questions why I said that. 1099, I like to explain, it's just a form that is used so the IRS can get different companies to tell on you. Hey, Lori got paid some money. Make sure she puts it on her tax return. So 1099 is a form to tell on you. You could get a 1099 if you're a sole prop. You also get 1099s when you're an LLC. People will still send them because they don't have to send them to corporations, but they just send them across the board to be safe. So 1099s is not synonymous with sole props. 1099 is just a form to report income outside of W-2. We all talked about an independent contractor. People were talking about and asking, what's an independent contractor if you're not a sole prop? What's that? Independent contractor is an HR term. It means you're not an employee, you're not subject to the labor laws. So saying I'm an independent contractor, well, you could say that if I'm an LLC, I'm an independent contractor. I'm not being hired in as an employee. So you can see the words DBA, 1099, independent contractor do not speak to the legal structure that you're operating under. So get accustomed to saying, if you're not registered with the Secretary of State, I'm a sole prop. Or if you are, say I'm an LLC or I'm an LLC taxed as an S corp. Understanding how you are structured is real important, as you learned last week. So that was a very quick rundown on all the terms as a good way to catch up with what we talked about last week that might have been a bit confusing. Please reach out to me if you have any questions on this. Just like you need to know, when we're kids, know your name, know your address, know your social security number. You need to know this information as well. Sadie will put my email in there in case you need to set up an appointment to go into more details. Okay, guys, let's get into some fun. That was enough serious stuff. Let's get into some fun. I'm so excited to have Diana on the show. Diana Bernal is a career coach and speaker. Diana started her career in training and recruiting for international financial services firm in Chicago. She's also been a successful business leader, transforming programs at USC, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and public radio station LA Ist. After working in corporate America, Diana is now self-employed. She's running her business from San Gabriel, but servicing coaching and corporate clients all over the US. Diana, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And I must say, all of those things that you mentioned on your first slide about DBA and LLCs, I think you and I have talked about almost all of them. So that's how you and I have gotten to know each other over the last 3 to 4 years.
That is so true. I didn't even think about that when I was presenting that today, but that is absolutely the truth because you were learning these things as you first started out, which
Yes.
to the subject that I know a little bit about the background, but really not because we've been talking about all the cool legal stuff. And like I told you, Diana, the thing about having you on the show has so many multi-facets to talk about because you are someone who basically probably, and I'm going to guess things that we're going to go in, you probably thought, hey, I'm going to work in the corporate America my whole life, you know? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I'm going to do this instead. So there's so many stories behind the stories, but even on a high level, I hear them like, wow, you go in this direction, you can go in this direction. Life is always happening. Just because you weren't an entrepreneur when you're in your 20s doesn't mean you can be at another time. There's so many stories, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's back up.
Okay.
When you were in high school, college, wherever you wanted to start, wherever you
Mhm.
want to start, what were you thinking you were going to be doing? What was your pathway at that time?
I always knew I wanted to be in corporate America. I grew up in the pop culture of the 80s. You know, this is Reaganomics, this is the boom of the mergers and acquisition era, and this is TV. This is TV shows like Dynasty and Dallas. And what my parents were doing, letting a little girl watch Dynasty and Dallas, is another conversation. But, you know, that was very much in the air. And my parents were blue collar, and there wasn't like one moment that I said, oh, I didn't want to do this. But my dad was a truck driver. My mom didn't work until she had to, and then she worked in a factory. And so I just knew I wanted this corporate downtown Chicago life with the skyscrapers and the big buildings and the shiny offices. And I knew that's what I wanted to go to.
Oh my God, I have to tell you this just as a quick side note. You and I resonate so much. I didn't even realize this. When I was growing up, much different time period, right? But when I was growing up, I was in little country town, as everybody knows, right? And I wanted to be a businesswoman so bad. I didn't even know what a businesswoman was. But when my friends made me play dolls, I played where I didn't have a kid and I went to work and they babysat my kid. And I didn't even know this, right? And it was Alexis on Dynasty, I think was her name, right? I wanted to be her. I so wanted to be her.
Those clothes, the earrings,
Oh,
you
and
know.
the commandment of the room. Oh
Yeah.
my God. She would just, oh yeah, we could go on. That inspired me so much. So I, left my little country town of beans and corn, having no friggin' idea what it was I was trying to do. But I just knew I had to be a businesswoman. And I even got to LA. I was like, I want to be in traffic 9 to 5, and I want to carry a briefcase. Well, that kind of got old real quick, but we won't
Yeah.
go there.
But
So
you need that inspiration. And so I knew I was just drawn to something else. And I got really lucky because going to college, I went to DePaul University, which is in downtown Chicago. So
Ah,
I could live at home and go to this school that had a really great business reputation. And also it afforded me the opportunity to keep working and to find jobs throughout my college time.
interesting. Interesting. So, what is some of the jobs you had early on? And I love this part of it. What would you say was the takeaway from them?
Oh,
What was the main influence from these experiences?
yeah, well, the Heller Financial job taught me about the world of the workplace, the ins and outs, why managers make decisions. And I was working in human resources. And it was really just, I got really lucky because in high school, my dad once said, well, maybe you should take a typing class. And I was like so offended. I'm like, no, I don't want to be a secretary. Sure enough, being a data entry person and later a secretary is what helped me pay for college because I ran out of money after 2 years. So at Heller Financial, I worked in the human resources department. I got really lucky. I went to the career office one day. I suppose it was somewhere around freshman year, and I had a part-time job in the suburbs, but that company closed. So I always talk about how my very first part-time job in high school that I thought was going to last me a little bit longer, I was a victim of a layoff, right? And so I know what it's like to be laid off at a critical time in your life. And so I went to the career office at DePaul. And this is why we call them job postings, because there was a bulletin board and there were the lists of the different pieces of paper of jobs. And this job at Heller Financial was looking for a part-timer to come in and be an assistant in the human resources department. I had no idea what human resources was. And because I was a great typist, I was really speedy because people don't know, there used to be typing tests.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And I know I typed more than 100 words per minute, which is really
Wow.
pretty
Yeah,
high.
yeah, it is.
So I got the job, and working in the human resources department, I learned everything that would then carry with me in any job I had about how bosses make decisions, about how they do succession planning, about how there's always something going on behind the scenes that the employees don't know about. And so I now can bring that experience with me when I coach clients who are negotiating salary or are worried about a layoff. All of that experience has helped me give people sort of the inside scoop.
That's really fascinating, almost like you were behind the theater seeing what really goes on in the play. That's really
Absolutely.
interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even have thought of that spin, but you're right. The HR department knows the good, bad, and ugly. They'll even know the layoffs before anybody else knows, other than the top, because they got to start preparing for them. By the way, see, I knew we resonated on so many different levels when you and I were just talking about legal structures. I could feel it. My inspiration to start my company at 25, people always ask, well, what were you inspired by at 25? No, desperation. Three companies I worked for went under or
Mm-hmm.
sold out. And I was like, I want to know if my life is changing. I want to know in advance. I want control of shutting the company down. I want to make the mistake, not someone else. That's what prompted me, is just saying, okay, I built this company with these people because I was in sales. That was my
Yes.
mission.
Yes.
By the way, 100 words plus typing is very impressive. That was one of the skills I did not obtain because after, yeah, I went, everybody knows me for my business schooling, right? My 2 year school after getting out of the bean patch picking beans was an applied associates in science. My sister,
Mm.
many years older than me, became a lab tech, and my mother said, you can either become a lab tech or stay and pick beans on the farm. So
That's for me, that's an easy choice.
yeah, I was like, okay, and I didn't even know what it meant. But where you jumped into business, having some business background, I jumped into business trying to get a job in business when I finally got out of there and wanted to.
Hmm.
They were like, "What can you do? Can you type?" No. What can you do? I can draw blood.
But you mentioned a really good thing, Lori, about having been laid off and then wanting to take control of your life, because
Yes,
sometimes people are afraid to go out on their own because they say, well, I have to build up clients, and what happens if I lose a client? Well, if you compare that to being an employee of a corporation, you have one client, and
yes,
that is your employer. And if that one employer, that one client decides that it's time to go in a different direction, as we say in Hollywood, then
yes.
you're out. At least when you're self-employed, you have the opportunity to have multiple clients. You have past clients that you can go to. You can have referrals that build from that. So it's not so much of a fear of having no clients. It's a matter of how you build up your momentum to have different opportunities.
That is so true. I have always felt as though if I'm on my own, I have options, I have choices, I
Yeah.
can take actions. And when I went on my own, it was a time period where it was considered really stupid to be an entrepreneur. I know, guys, okay, I know this is shocking for the younger, but this was the reasoning. And I was reprimanded a lot on this. You don't have the benefits. You don't have the pension. You don't have the 401. You don't have the insurance. What are you doing going on your own and losing all those benefits? It was considered stupid to do. So I was really, I was like, okay, I'm screwing up again, but at least I'm in control of it. And then
Yes.
what happened not long after that was IBM did the first big layoff, and that was the shock of society that
Hmm.
maybe there's not so much security in the jobs, which the younger entrepreneurs are going, what are you guys even talking about, right? So, how do you build the security emotionally in yourself? Because we're talking about really logical things. It's hard to argue our logic, but then the human goes, oh, I'm still so scared.
Yeah,
That's
it's
on
all
that.
about mindset. And I know Sadie is going to drop in the chat eventually today a checklist that I have for people to assess their own readiness. And one of the things is, can I be self-motivated? Can I handle uncertainty and risk? And the way I do that is I look at my past successes. So when I was thinking of going out on my own, I did have that fear like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Now I'm lucky that I am married and my husband has the healthcare benefits. But I have plenty of other friends who are single and are self-employed, and they figure it out. So that is part of today, the different options available to us. But I just had to remind myself, okay, I put myself through college. I moved from Chicago to Los Angeles for a job and really only knowing one person. And I made that work. I went to grad school. I paid for college entirely on my own. I went to grad school at night. I finished my undergrad at night working full time because the money does run out. I had done really hard things and I was successful. All these years working at places like USC and public radio, I had built programs, I had made mistakes for sure. And that's another conversation, but I
Yep.
learned from all of them. So I just had enough confidence in my ability and my capabilities so that if I didn't know something, I would figure it out. If I didn't know if I should be an LLC or a sole prop, I would call the SBDC and start to learn. If I didn't know the thing about being a DBA, et cetera, I would figure it out. And I had been, just telling myself that, look, I'm a smart person. And then I also have a great cheerleader. And my husband, he's like, you'll figure it out. I know you will. And so sometimes you just have to do it. You have to jump at it. But yeah, you do kind of have to be ready. It's not overnight. You have to get to that place where you're ready to do it. You're confident enough in yourself, but you don't want to wait so hard that you're miserable. When I talk to people about careers and making changes, being in the middle is the worst place because if you're in a really bad job, you want to get out, but that means you could be desperate. If you're in a great job, that's cool. Everything you're thriving and that's a great place to be. But it's this middle that people have a tough time. So if you find yourself in the middle, that is the time to take control and to try and figure out what your next step is.
There's so much I want to unpack here. So what I want to do is I want to jump in real quick to this story on how you then launched in to your own company and what your company does. Because Diana, you are a powerhouse of great information and advice and inspiration on what you're doing right now. So I want to get into what you're doing. So let's catch the story up. So
Okay.
you get laid off and then you get all these jobs and then you decide to go on your own. Kind of fast track us through there because I want the audience to have a good foundation of what you're currently doing now because guys, you just saw a sampling of it and she's a powerhouse in it. So please catch us up.
I appreciate that. And powerhouse, that word is part of my morning mantra. And I actually, used it this morning. So
And I don't
obviously
use it that often either, too. So that's there you go.
it's funny because I always, if I think about my early career, right now I am a career coach and I'm an accountability coach. And that's what makes me different. Like you can find people to get advice on your resume, your interviewing skills, but I help people make change. And that's the hard part. That's when we're in the middle where we're not quite sure. So through my career coaching and my workshops, I help people take the next step and get past all those obstacles and those barriers. Like, how do you find the confidence? Do you have a financial cushion? All of those things. And when I started out my job in human resources way back when, I really did like it. And everything I learned there, I carried with me. And I was always the go-to person for my friends and friends of friends, like, hey, can you help me with my resume? Or, hey, I need to negotiate salary. Can you help me with this? Or, oh, I'm just really stuck. And so I was kind of like the Oprah for the workplace. And when you are thinking about going out on your own, one of the things that we say to people is, what do people come to you for already? Think of how they're already coming to you for advice and lean into that. And for me, that was giving people career advice to make change. And then that's how I started thinking, okay, this is something that I really want to pursue. And I will say that I thought about doing it 21 years ago. I really did. I had a group of women, single women, coming to my cool rent controlled apartment in Santa Monica. And we all sat around the room and we had notebooks. And I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. I'm going to do something with this. And then I got pregnant.
And then your life went another direction.
Yeah. And I remember I was like thinking of creative ways to have, a business and all that, but life takes over. But I always kept coming back to it. And so finally, a couple of years ago, I really started to say, okay, I need to create my path to launch this and to do this.
There's something to be said, whether you want to call it divine perfect timing or just perfect timing. But as you get older in life, you start to see that when things don't happen, people get frustrated, it's not happening. Many times it's just not the right time. It's hard to do that. Am I not moving forward because I'm afraid to move forward and I'm stopping myself? Or am I not moving forward because something's actually hindering me that's giving me insight that now's not the right moment? That is
Yeah.
hard, and entrepreneurs suffer with that. They're trying to say, is it not working because I'm not trying hard enough? And I want to comment on you to comment on this, Diana, because I got to say one more thing on this. It's really important for me to say this and get your comment on it. I see too many entrepreneurs that are feeding into this line that says, well, you got to have passion and just do it. So they jump off the cliff without knowing if they got the financial security. They don't have anything because they think that, well, I'm a little bit afraid. It's just my afraid. So there's this fine line between pushing yourself through when you're afraid, but plan it so you're not ending up harming yourself. And I know you got some words of wisdom on that question. So run with it.
I do, because passion was so big in the 90s. It was like,
Yes. Oh,
find your
yeah.
passion. There
Just
are
find your passion.
books, The Passion Plan,
I know.
Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. And that can be true for certain people. But actually, it was Mark Cuban a few years ago who was interviewed, and he laid it out beautifully. He said, a lot of people want to do their passion. And for the 1% of people who can be the baseball player or can even work at the MLB because they love sports, good for them. And I know a friend back, by the way, he was the Moneyball guy. He had gotten an economics degree, and so he was working for one of the baseball teams in data, and he got so burnt out, and so now he does something entirely different. So what Mark Cuban said is like, do what you're really good at, so that way people will recognize it and compensate you for it. And
I
so
love
that's
that.
what I try to work with people on, is to try and figure out what are the skills that you have that someone will pay you for. And then you can try and align it with your interests. So for instance, if you're good at public relations and you love music, you can work for the orchestra, or you could work for the Hollywood Bowl, or you could work for a place like that. Or you could just be really good at public relations, make a boatload of money, so that way you can have a subscription to see the shows you want. So you kind of have to find that intersection of your skills and interests to then take that next leap forward to figure out, is this something that someone will pay me for suitably? Someone will pay you to do the thing.
And I think that when we look at and I'm so glad you said that about passion. I want to go back. I think that whole passion call is so overrelated, and it just makes people get off course and think they got to figure out what their life's about and this, and they get off course. I got an announcement, everybody. I got one for you. You want to know the purpose of life? I figured it out. You ready? Life. That's the purpose of life. It's living, it's life. But I want to come back to what you were talking about. I love what you're saying about find what people want to buy from you. And one of the things that I've noticed about, let's call it our talent. Let's just use that word right now to have a
Good
word.
word.
Our talent are those things that we don't even know where we learned or how we even came upon them. And they're the simplest things for us to do. And they're the unrecognizable things. Like one of the things that one of my clients said a long time ago, and it made me realize that that's my talent behind all the things I do. And they said, I can take complex things and make them simple and communicate them in a simple manner. Now,
Yeah,
that wouldn't you wouldn't think that leads to finance and tax and legal structure consulting, but it does. So,
yeah.
how does someone sit back and figure out what is this talent? What is the marketplace? What is it that maybe inside me could allow me to be an entrepreneur? Because Diana, a lot of people today, they don't have the product or the service, and they're launching, they want to be an entrepreneur and are looking
Mm-hmm.
backwards on what they can take with them. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah. Well, the first place I tell people to look is, look at your experience at work and where have you been commended? What have they said in your performance reviews? What have they always gone to you for in the workplace, wherever it is that you're working? See what threads exist there. And then you can also look at, again, the things that people come to you for. Are you the person who's always got a great garden and people ask you for landscaping advice? That actually happened to my husband, by the way. He was doing a great job of landscaping the front yard because we went, it's sort of eco-friendly. We got rid of green grass. And he would have people stop him and say, hey, are you the landscaper? Who's your landscaper? And so it's an example of, you've got to see where it is in any which way of your life. And if you keep thinking about it, and don't just think about it in one weekend. I always
Right.
suggest that people find a time once a week. Maybe it's Sunday morning, maybe it's Monday night, wherever you have the energy to think and to journal on the things that you love to do and the places where people have recognized you. And this is not the time to be shy or humble. You really can even go back to your old performance reviews and see maybe I was really recognized for resolving conflict. I was recognized for sales or for retention with customer service or how I'm dealing with clients. Then maybe you have a good sales angle. Maybe you're a good people person, as we like to say. Find the threads that already exist and then see where they can take you.
That is great advice, and I'm gonna connect a couple things we talked about and then ask a question from that. You know how you said about the typing and you were like almost offended being I took this performance, well, it wasn't a performance test. It was when I was going into college and they did one of these Hugh Meyer-Briggs or something like
Oh,
that.
Myers-Briggs, yeah, yeah.
And they came up with this answer for me, and I was so appalled by it, right? They said I would excel the most at being a teacher. I'm like, I am not a kindergarten, because I was going to be a businesswoman, right? I wasn't going to be a teacher. Then years later, I take the same test. Teacher. I'm like, I am not a teacher. I got offended every time. Well, what do I do every day of my life? Teach, right? So it was my own beliefs in what I had in society portrayed that I was supposed to be that blocked me from seeing it. So I think sometimes we are shutting ourselves down because it's not the picture we painted that we perceived from other influences what we should be. Comment
Yeah.
on that?
And I have my own example of that. Like when I thought about being an entrepreneur, if I was thinking about college or right after college, I would think about people like Bill Gates or Henry Ford. They were entrepreneurs who built a big thing. I didn't realize that my girlfriend Tammy, who's an acupuncturist, she's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
My friend who does graphic design on her own, she's an entrepreneur. So it took that move from Chicago to Los Angeles, where half the people are self-employed, they're in the entertainment industry, they are freelancers, where I got to see, oh, there's a different type of entrepreneurship. It doesn't have to be this big thing. Not everyone has to be Sarah Blakely. I would love to be Sarah Blakely, but I can also be Diana and serve my community in a way that is exciting and rewarding for me and still be self-employed. So it's having a different vision that self-employed, like you're self-employed, I'm self-employed, my friend the acupuncturist is self-employed. We all have our own takes on what that means.
Oh my God, we gotta go further into this, Diana, because I think you just hit something that's so, so important. We as society get caught up, whether it's the famous actor, the famous baseball player that you were talking about, and so many entrepreneurs and myself at one time,
Mhm,
if
mhm.
I'm not at the top of the food chain, if my revenue isn't this, if I haven't, whatever, I am not successful, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'll tell you what totally changed my view on this. And I'm not saying this is true across the board, guys. This is one of those things I'm going to say because Lori says this stuff, right? I became a banker. Now, why did this tie in? Because I then got in front of a lot of very wealthy people, right? And I got to know them because then I became a CFO for their companies as well, an interim CFO. And I started to realize, not that it's across the board, but they're not always that happy. Okay. I was like,
True.
I did. I met all these rich people, and I'm like, okay. And also, I'm going to whisper this into the camera. Their lives are really screwed up a lot of times. But the acupuncturist, you, me, and all these individuals, they're paying their bills, they're taking their kids to the soccer game, they're having fun, they're having good relationships. Why is it that society, and more important, we don't give our credit to the little tiny entrepreneurs that are living a cool life? Can we just take a moment and comment on that?
Amen, because we are the volume. We are all the small business people that they talk about in the news about building businesses and who we're helping. The majority of businesses are small businesses. And I don't know how we define small, but as long as I am meeting my financial needs, I'm having fun, and I'm challenging myself. Here I am at a stage where a lot of people start to want to glide. I've got someone in mind who I'm thinking about, and she's just looking for her last job, or she's just looking to finish off until she retires. Okay, that is fine for her. I'm not. I still am challenging myself. I'm learning about AI. I'm taking courses. I have never read more than I have been reading now to make sure that I'm staying up to speed on things. So it depends on your stage in life too. I think that has a lot to do with it.
It does. And when I have to be fully engaged, and that's what I identify what you're speaking about. And I mean fully engaged with life. And that doesn't matter what it is. You can be sitting in a creek bed just watching the birds. That's fully engaged in life. I think that is what makes us alive and vibrant and young and exciting is
Yeah.
whatever we're doing to be fully engaged in it. And I think that if we can start looking at entrepreneurship as a way to create income, freedom, excitement, adventure, we are onto something now because the goal isn't make a million, sell the company, do all this other stuff that we've been told. It's just, first of all, guys, you got to buy a quart of milk. Everybody that knows me knows you got to buy a quart of milk. You got to be able to do that, right? When people give me these ideas that don't have a lot of concrete, I go, well, yeah, how are you going to buy a quart of milk with that? You got to at least buy a quart of milk. But if we look at it like, how can we really play, enjoy, and have financial success to cover our bills? Because people who can't pay bills aren't happy. I think that's the ultimate goal.
And we actually kind of have no choice now because if you look at the way society is trending, our business environment is trending. We hear about the gig economy, right? And we hear about multi-hyphenates, which
Yeah.
is just a fancy way to say that I can be a self-employed person that does more than one thing.
Yes.
And that's where we kind of almost have to go because there was a guy at South by Southwest this year, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he talks a lot about this, like gone are the ideas that all of our jobs are 40-hour-a-week jobs and that you will
Yes.
work for one employer. I guarantee you, my kids in college right now, they will have some type of variety where maybe, she coaches gymnastics during the day, but she does social media at night. I mean, and I'm not saying that you need to work 60 or 80 hours a week, but you might find a 40-hour work week, a 50-hour work week that is a combination of things. And that's where we are headed. And right now, with so many layoffs and companies being unwilling to hire and add full-time employees, now is the time to become that contractor and to get in front of them and get an ongoing contract.
Yes, and that gives you the financial security because it's a phrase I love and I've loved since the 20s. Multiple revenue streams. I love
Yeah.
multiple revenue streams. I
Yes.
just want to, because that gives you security when you have multiple revenue streams. And the other thing is, I think people aren't meant to just do one thing every day. I think that takes away from our spirit, our aliveness.
And for some, if that's the way they like to do it,
Yeah.
amen to that. But I think we are in this place where the workforce is meeting this demand or this interest of people to do a couple of different things. And so now is the time to take advantage of it because I think this is going to be the trend. We're already seeing it. It is the trend.
Yeah, I got my enrolled agent. That's the tax preparation certified by the U.S. Treasury, and it's only been, I think it was like 4 years ago, I decided to do it, right? And I never, in my wildest dreams, ever thought I was going to get into tax preparation. And I don't do tax returns right now. It's not my intent. So everybody's like, "Why are you doing it?" I said, "Well, two reasons. One, I've been around the taxes so much, I felt like I wanted to fill in the blank on my knowledge because it's like I was frustrated not understanding how this works and this works. So being a CFO and legal structures, it was the natural thing, right? But the other thing I said, my personality isn't one to retire. They say when you're older, you need to keep your mind alert and do crossword puzzles. I hate puzzles. Why don't I do tax returns and get paid for it, right? So I picture myself, if I'm still alive at 80, I'm going to be doing tax returns, getting paid for it, and go, okay, crossword puzzles done for the day. So that's where you're creating, your life and you're living it throughout. And so you can have multiple careers, or somebody can just say, I want to retire and I just want to hang out. I think it's the time of the individual allowing to be the individual.
I love that. Yeah. And that's where the stages of life come in. Some people find that entrepreneurship opportunity early in their life. Others, like me, I got married and we had a mortgage and we had college on the mind. But then I came back to it later. Even when my kids were in college, I was sending off my first kid to college. And here I decided I'm going to be self-employed, which a lot of people might think is crazy, like you thought. But it's the opportunity presented itself. And I was tired. I didn't want to go back. I did not want to go for another full-time job again.
Yeah, I want to get to another thing on your checklist, but before we do, I want to go back to something you said on the checklist that was so important. I had a little note that I wrote down here and I said I did not want to miss it. You spoke of this example, and I think it needs to be highlighted. You said take a situation where you had succeeded in the past and take that and use that as a springboard emotionally to say, I can do this in the future. You gave examples. I think I'd like to spend one more minute highlighting that because that was a gem.
Oh, good. Well, one of the things that you can do is think of your top five. And I like to do 5 and 5. So in journaling in the morning, and I don't do this every day, but I was doing it a lot last year, 5 acknowledgments. Acknowledge myself for, I used to bite my nails and now I don't. Acknowledge myself for getting through college. Acknowledge myself for negotiating a raise one day. Acknowledge myself for holding a workshop. I remember the first time I did like a free workshop around careers for women trying to figure out the next step, right? I can't remember what it was called. But of course, I was afraid that no one was going to show up. And I was afraid that it was going to be terrible. And it was 8 people, which is just enough. And I made lifelong friends that I still know now. And actually, one of them turned out to be a paying client. So I did try things. And so I will acknowledge myself in the morning, 5 things. And again, they can be as small as I lost 10 pounds and I kept it off, which is not small, to, I got married, I got divorced. I didn't get divorced. I found the right thing, just constantly acknowledging yourself. So that way, it's there when you need it and you're not even thinking about it, that you can tap into your success. So 5 acknowledgments in the morning and also 5 gratitudes. Because if we lead our life with gratitude, then we can at least ground ourselves that everything's not going to be perfect, but I'm grateful that I have a house, I have retirement savings, I have a supportive family, I have a great network to help me when I'm done. And those things kind of help you then get through the rest of your day.
This might be going off on a tangent with what you speak about, but you'll know I have come to the just solid conclusion, Diana, solid conclusion. It all starts with how we feel about ourselves inside. And if we're looking
Mm.
for, I know that's words that said all the time, if we're looking for validation somewhere else, but long time ago, and it might have been Wayne Dyer, I'm not sure. He was saying that he wrote this book. Yeah, it was Wayne Dyer. He wrote Real Magic. He got 2 letters in the mail. One of them he opened and it said it was the greatest book they ever read, and he was feeling really good. And one of them it opened and said it was the worst book he ever read. So, wrote he felt really bad. I heard this him speaking it live. He said, I took both letters. I thought about it the next day. I wrote one response. I photocopied it and sent it to both. That makes you think, what could you write in both? Right, right.
Mhm.
And this was what was so fascinating. He wrote, you may be right. That diffused from looking at the outside. I learned that at 25 and I never lost it. And I realized that if I looked to people to praise me, to feel good about me, it would be as much toxic as if I looked to people who say bad things about me. It's got to be an inside job. And in an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, I think if there's one thing it does is it forces us to find within because we're kind of on our own a lot.
We are on our own a lot. And I think that's really true. You have to have that self-esteem, and not that everything has to be perfect. There is no such thing as perfect. Not that everything has to go really well all the time, because there will be mistakes. You will make calls. People won't call you back. Some will, and you will learn along the way, but you have to be grounded enough in yourself that you know that you can do things. And that's why when I look back to that story of when I thought I was going to be a career coach 21 years ago, I'm actually glad it didn't map out that way, because I had such amazing work experiences. Again, where I helped transform departments, where I built up, where I saw and really learned different companies and business models and cash flow statements that I never would have known 21 years ago. So I am grateful then that it unfolded the
Yeah.
way it did.
You used a word, and we talked about this a little bit before the show, and I'm going to bring this all together. Perfect. So many people, and we talked about your website. I want you to elaborate on it. So many entrepreneurs are waiting for everything to be perfect before they do anything. Comment on that, Diana. That's another key.
Don't confuse the perfect with the perfectly good. You got to start
Love that.
somewhere. You got to start somewhere. And I am here today. I don't know how many people we have on the call, but to all, 40 some of you, I guarantee you that I am not perfect today. My website isn't ready, but I came because I knew I wanted to have this conversation. You can always find me on LinkedIn. That's why I think Sadie's dropping that off.
Yeah, she is.
We all evolve. And here's the example I'll give you. I was at the Bare Naked Ladies concert a couple of weeks ago at the Greek 30 at the Greek Theater, and they were so fun and they were so good. And they talked about their time in like performing at colleges. So think of every band you've ever gone to see and think of how scrappy they were in high
Oh,
school and
yep,
college and
yep,
how unrefined they were and how they always did like a bunch of covers because they didn't have enough of their own music. We
yep,
all start out that way. And
yep,
I
yes,
think a lot of influencers online today are trying to share that. There used to be something called the Martha Stewart, what was it called? Syndrome, that a lot of women back in the early 2000s, when Martha was a big thing in the magazine and the TV show, a lot of women were overwhelmed and feeling like crap because she did everything and it looked so easy and so
perfect. Yeah,
perfect.
it
So
did.
we are no longer in the Martha Stewart era. And obviously that didn't work out too
I
well.
was gonna say, didn't she go to jail or
She
something?
did go to jail, but I think, I've commented about that. You can go check out there's a great sort of documentary story about her on Netflix.
Okay,
Um,
yeah,
but
I
every
didn't.
entrepreneur has that story of how they've screwed up.
Yeah.
I've already gone through different iterations of my podcast. I'm already on the third iteration. And I think that's one of the things about being an entrepreneur is that you have to be willing to iterate, to roll with the punches, to trial and error because you may think, oh, I'm going to do this, and this is what my company is going to be called, and this is my website, and this is my logo, and this is my colors. And a year later, you might be like, that logo doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
Or I've realized by the people who come to me that my market is actually over here, not over here. So you have to be willing to go with the trend where it's taking you that lines up for you.
Yeah, I think there's a real skill in both business, definitely in business, but also personal, where you are living in, I'm being metaphysical here, but you're living in the present moment. There's really truth and wisdom. Live in the present moment, run down the road, see what's going on, take the data, but come back and live and respond from here. I
Hmm.
always I look at it like I got a little carrier pigeon in my head, right? The
Hmm.
little carrier pigeon flies out, gets a couple messages from down the road, sends them back to me for me to read right here to make a
Yeah.
choice here. That's how I try to stay in business in the present moment. Otherwise, you can get so down the road or get committed to what you thought was true and not change your approach. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, you have to evolve. I mean, chances are, if you started out self-employed 5 years ago, and if you're doing the same thing today, I would question what opportunities you're missing out on.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when people come to you, I know it's for many different reasons, but have you seen themes? What's going on with people? Something that you notice a lot of people are struggling with or trying to
Mhm.
achieve, some themes that you're seeing in your work every day.
Yeah, yeah. There's two themes that come to mind, and one
Okay,
is this conversation about do I become self-employed? Because I have been talking to a lot of people who are probably 40 something.
okay,
One is a little bit younger, one's a little bit older, and they're tired of it. They got laid off or they've been looking for a new job and they can't find the right thing, but they need to work and they want to work. So that theme of trying to figure out how can I go out on my own is really a theme that I'm seeing today. And then that other theme is about what success looks like. There are plenty of people who have great degrees, they have great jobs. And one gal said, I'm over it. Like she's 35 and she works for a big tech company, but she's already over it. And I don't want her to be over it that way. So it's like, how can we find joy in our lives and either a job where the culture is good, you like the product or service you're making, maybe you're not making $250,000 a year, but you are getting paid fairly for what you think you are bringing, and you have the flexibility to do the things that you want to do in your personal life. So I am seeing that trend that, that corner office is no longer the big deal anymore.
I'm not against making a lot of money by no means, but I tend to sense that people are finally realizing that let me go after something that I really enjoy and brings me joy. And if it happens that I make a lot as an outcome, that's great, but they're not chasing the corner office the almighty dollar to the degree they did or was perceived to do so when I was in that 20s and 30s. Do you notice that as well?
Yes, and I was just talking to someone actually last week. She's thinking about her next step already. Great. And she was talking about these other things. I'm like, wait a minute, you have been doing the same. She's a fundraiser. She fell into fundraising like a lot of us did at any given point, like during college and right after college. So she had been doing the same thing. She got recruited from one job to another to another. I said, you've never really stopped to think about what you want to do, who you are. And she's like, no, I haven't. I said, you're in a good position. You make good money. Everything's fine. They love you at your job and they want to support you. I think you need to sit down and figure out, again, do this weekly journaling, do a lot of thinking, talk to friends and family about who she is and what's going to be that next step for her. And I said, you may choose fundraising. You may choose, like, this has been so much fun, I want to keep at it. But at least it's your choice. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of these folks in their 40s or even the mid 30s are finding, that they went to college, they got a degree in something, they started along that path, and then they got recruited or they got promoted or they just took another job. And they never really stopped to think, is this really what I want to do? And that's part of my story that we haven't even actually touched on, is how I made the move. Because
Yeah, please do.
after human resources, and I do the whole thing, I get my bachelor's degree, I even get a grad degree in human resources, but I was in this corporate stuffy environment. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
I know that feeling.
And it was a career workshop, and a friend had gone through a career workshop. And she's like, maybe you might want to take a look at this. And that was also transformative because it helped me understand that I can take a job and I can get well paid. I mean, when I was a lot of people think, oh, nonprofit doesn't pay. I was making almost $300,000 at my height, and not including benefits on top of that, because I was so good at what I did and I was at the right places.
Right.
So it taught me early on, this career workshop that I went to, how to focus on myself, try and again look at that combination of skills and interests, and to carve out the right path for me. So I actually used that then with a lot of the work I do today.
That's very fascinating how that came about. Tying in the Alexis and Dynasty. So there was a time period. I'm in LA. I'm in banking, around the investment banking. I'm going to all the parties. I'm in Beverly Hills. I got the Mercedes. I'm doing all this, and I'm not happy. Right. And I'm like going, I don't like this. I don't like these meetings. I don't like the circles I'm in. I don't like anything around it. And I remember driving around LA and looking at, like, you look up and you see the expensive houses on the hill. You see that whenever you're driving around LA. And this thought came to my head, and it was a moment of truth for me. I don't even want the big house on the hill.
Yeah.
I had been chasing the big house on the hill, and I was like, I'd be fine with a sleeping bag on a backpacking trail. I don't want the house on the hill. And I
Yeah.
realized that in many ways, I was trying to not be the little girl from the farm.
Yeah, yeah, and we too often don't stop to
Yeah,
think, what do we want at this point? And it's okay to sort of be on that wheel when you're in your 20s and 30s, because you got to pay off student loans, you want to buy a house, but at some point, and this is where I see it, I think people in their mid 40s, they're like, wait a minute, is this the right thing? And so that's where I hope to catch people before they take that next job and then 12 months later realize, oh, I'm not happy.
yeah, yeah. One of the things I say all the time, and I've been saying it for a while, and I'll give you the reasons, is there's no better time than now to be an entrepreneur. And what I mean is, I go back to 25. I had to have office space because it was only professional if I did. I had to have an answering service because you had to have somebody answer the phones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, then I remember, being one day in Starbucks, answering the phone and saying, "Hold on, I want a, non-fat latte." Today, people have not only the technology, but the acceptance to do business in a coffee shop while walking
Hmm.
the dog. I think this is the golden age of entrepreneurship for many reasons. Your thoughts on whether you think it's the greatest time to be an entrepreneur, and if so, why?
Yeah, I think it's never been easier. And one thing about all those resources, like you will go to Upwork to find someone to handle your bookkeeping or your website or your social media. You can find contractors. A lot of people go to be self-employed because they also don't want to manage people anymore.
Yes.
When I was a manager, sometimes, when you had great employees, it's great. But doing the performance reviews and then dealing with conflict and then this person isn't performing, that's a real drag. And a lot of people, when they leave corporate America, that's part of why they leave because they don't want to deal with managing big teams anymore. But guess what? When you are self-employed, you still have oversight over your contractors. So you still have to give them feedback. You still have to hold them accountable. So you're not entirely supervising people the same way, but you do have to manage these other things, these other people that you rely on.
I think the difference is you have control. I always say the worst thing you do to a manager is have them be managing and responsible for somebody's outcome and not have as much control over the hiring and firing. And a lot of managers are in that case, right?
Yeah.
You're an entrepreneur and you're managing your vendors. You're absolutely correct. You have to still do the manage, but at least you have control. You can make the decisions of whether to have them on or not.
Yeah, and I think one of my mistakes was that, like, when I hired someone to do marketing for me like 2 years ago, I thought, okay, this is great. This is going to change everything. It didn't change that much. And I did not work with her for that long. So don't think that one contractor is going to change your world. Don't
Right.
expect to work with the same contractor
Yep.
2 to 3 years down the road. You might. There might be places where you do have excellent contracting. But, as you grow, the contractors may or may not grow with you. So,
You know,
when you hire a contractor, whether it's to do social media, bookkeeping, legal, et cetera, just think about it like, okay, I'm going to contract with this person for 3 to 6 months and let them know that. That way you don't feel like you're on the hook for them, that you're employing them, that you're letting them down. Just say, look, this is a short-term contract and we'll see what my needs are. And if your needs change, then that's a reality.
That is great advice. I have seen so many entrepreneurs and small companies keep contractors or employees on because they feel bad. They don't want to let them go to the demise of their own company.
Yeah, yeah. And don't forget, clear is
Firing people.
kind. Clear is kind. I got that from Brene Brown, and I tell everyone that whether you're giving feedback to an employee, to your boyfriend, you got to be clear with people, and because they need to know either their skills aren't keeping up or that's not what the market needs anymore, right? So you can say to someone, look, I'm not using Squarespace anymore. I'm going to be using WordPress. That contractor needs to know, gosh, I need to get better at WordPress because that's where, you know, everyone's.
I love that. Clear is kind. We got a couple minutes. I want to hit on one topic and then I want you to talk more about what it is you do with clients, what they know. But one of the things that you were talking about, and it just slipped my mind now, is getting clients, getting them. I'm going to phrase it this way, locally. I'm just going to use the word locally versus people don't realize they come one
Yeah.
at a time locally. You know where I'm going. Talk I don't want that was on my notes too. I don't want to miss us talking about that.
Yeah. Most of my clients so far have come from referrals. People I used to work with, people who know me, people I meet, networking. So I think networking is key. You have to be selective about your networking. I felt like Marsha Brady 2 years ago because I joined all these different associations and clubs, and not all of them were helpful in a certain way. I mean, it's always helpful to meet people and to keep talking about what you do, but not all of them were fruitful. And so now I figured out the different networking association groups that I can be a part of that help open doors for me. And to build your client base, it takes time. You need strong operations, which is something that I have only recently learned.
Yeah.
Before, I thought I could just keep everything on an Excel spreadsheet. No, 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 that doesn't work anymore. You need a real CRM. Thank you, Diane Martinez, who is on the line here, I think, who is helping me build operations, because I never realized that that was going to be so important. And the idea that you're just going to put up a website, that I'm going to put up Diana Inc. and I do career coaching, and that people are just going to find me, I need to be out there. And in my case, I live on LinkedIn because that's where people who
Yeah.
are thinking about a career change are living. So the idea that you're just going to put up a website to sell guitar lessons or baked goods, it's more than that. It takes time to build, which is why I always tell people have some type of financial cushion or other things. Maybe you're contracting, what I did, and a lot of people do, is before we quit that job, we arranged to be a contractor with that employer. So
Yes.
that way
Yes.
you have at least, 20 to 30% of your revenue figured out for the first 6 months.
My end before coming to you is I have always said, intelligence, intellect, passion, these are wonderful traits to have. They're great. But what really allows people to succeed a lot of times is experience. And the thing I want more than anything is wisdom. Diana, you have the wisdom, you have the experience, and what you've spoken about today is the wisdom because you're not just the rah rah coach, just you can do it. You've talked about the financial security, have a plan. You've hit on the emotional well being, the finding your passion, going inside. That is all about wisdom, and that is impressive. I want you to take as many minutes as you need to because we were spoiled today by getting your insight. Now we know how you work. I want you to be able to tell to the audience, how do you work with clients? Do you structure webinars? Do you try give
Mhm.
us your information about how people they know how to get in touch with you? How do you help them? How do you structure your services?
Right now, I do one-on-one coaching. Group workshops are on the horizon, so follow me to pay attention for that. I have done a podcast over the few years and I put it on hiatus again. I needed to rework it. I needed to do something different. The podcast started out in the closet. Then it started, kid you not, podcast started out in the closet. Then it started out over here in the corner of my office. And now this third version is actually a space, a founder space in Pasadena that I'm going to next week.
Oh,
So the podcast will come back. And then I'm also thinking about what digital courses, what materials can I put on my website? Again, the website, I'm telling you as an entrepreneur, you're going to change your mind. Things are going to evolve. And that's why DianaInc.com isn't 100% yet, but that's find me on LinkedIn. At least the Instagram is alive and well too, where you can see what I do. And you're right about how I work with people because I have a little bit of tough love. You know, I don't have time to mess around and you don't have time to mess around. So I'm going to be honest with you and I'm going to encourage you and I'm going to look for the optimism and look for the silver lining. But I'm going to say, you know what, it doesn't sound like your employer wants to make this work. Or it doesn't sound like that is the right, I'm feeding back to them what I hear and I will be clear.
I love it. I can see where someone that just needs some person to walk them through, give them some structure, some accountability, having some sessions with you could be a game changer in their life because you get to look at it from an outside observer with all your information, intellect, and wisdom from over the years. Thank you so much. You can see the chat's been going crazy in comments and everything. And please do download that. Sadie will make sure you get it and make sure you check out Diana's website. You are a powerhouse. You are. I chose the right word.
I
I
love it.
absolutely love talking with you every time that we had conversations about your company. I knew I would have a fun conversation. And from the beginning story on through, we have so much that we resonate with. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I sure appreciate it.
You're welcome. And Lori, this is a shout out to the SBDC too. You know, I have not had to pay for your services. I have called the SBDC how many times to get advice on legal, about my name, about the DBA, and all these things. And so if you are thinking of being self-employed, that is a good place to start.
Ah, thank you so much. So with that, I'm going to bring Sadie back. Sadie, we got an SBDC plug here.
I mean, it was so organic, and all I could thinking when this was happening, it's like, what do they always say? It's like sometimes we get information or people come into our lives, and it's like you need that message at that moment. And it's like that's why I love this program because it's like seriously, you feed so much of the soul in different stages.
Oh,
Yeah,
totally
I'm so
do.
glad.
Totally do. Okay, well, everybody, Sadie, as always, is going to stay behind. That gives you time to get anything out of the chat. You can get my email. You can get anything you want out of it. Make sure you get Diana's information. And I got this feeling you're going to see podcast and information and a whole lot of tools come from Diana in the future. She's just getting started, guys, just getting started. So, as always, frequent flyers, I saw you out there. I think I saw in the chat somebody did a quart of milk. I think I saw a cup of milk in the chat. Way to go. So I love you guys. Thank you for being here every week. And if you were new to the show, hey, it's a lot of fun. Join us every single week for Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Thank you again, Diana, and I'll see everybody next week. Bye,
You're
everybody.
welcome. Thank you guys.
Bye, everyone.